and welcome. So today I have Carly with me. Hi Carly, welcome. Carly has a bachelor's in biology, nutrition. She was a personal trainer. She's currently taking her holistic nutrition course, and she's done a cert in children's nutrition. So that's what I wanted to talk about today as part of the back to school series with children's health. I know, in my family I call them my babies, but when I reference my babies, they're not actually mine. I have 3 nieces and a nephew, so I'm constantly trying to work with my mom and my brother and his significant other with their nutrition, because I feel like it's so important. And the oldest, Riley, she was diagnosed with ADHD. So we try to look at it from a very nutrition standpoint, and what sort of things can we be doing to help. And I even see this in my practice with my clients and their babies with nutrition and all of these labels that we like to put on them, and what sort of things can help them. So I just wanted to open up a dialogue today about children's health and nutrition to see, what sort of things would you recommend. I know what I discuss with my clients with some of the things, but I'm interested to see your standpoint coming from such a solid nutrition background. So what sort of things did you learn about in your children's nutrition class, or through the holistic nutrition? What would you suggest to parents with children?
I think there's kind of basically 5 things that I always focus on. It kind of depends on the order and the importance, depending on what the child's dealing with and what their current nutritional situation is like.
Mm-hmm.
The 5, I guess I can just list them. The first one would be just making sure that there is enough healthy fats in the diet.
Mm-hmm.
The brain is over 60% fat, and for a kid who's developing and learning and growing so much, making sure that is there is going to be the best thing for them. Just wholesome foods in general. So making sure, it sounds cliche, but eat your fruits and vegetables. And if they really don't like fruits and vegetables, try other options, cook them in a different way. Try smoothies, try juices, not fruit juice. Make the juice yourself. Just trying other options to try and broaden their palate so that they can be more accepting of healthy foods. Making sure that you're being mindful of their behavior and their mood after they eat. So if they're having something in their lunches, and then all of a sudden in the afternoons their teacher is saying oh, we're having a bad day, or they're consistently tired or cranky, those are all signals that are maybe saying something in their food isn't quite working for them. Mm-hmm. Making sure that there's complete protein, and then just balanced meals. So not just one, protein, fat, and carb, not just one or the other.
Mm-hmm. I think these are all huge points, because I know if you look at the diets now that a lot of children eat, parents are busy and it's on the run, or there's a lot of processed snacks because it's easy, and I don't think they get enough of healthy fats in their diet. And if you don't necessarily start your children off in this concept where your parent, as a parent you're doing it, or as a family you're doing it, then it's easy to get sidetracked. I know personally, in my family, we cut out a lot of sugar, so we definitely limit how much sugar, refined sugars they have, which is really hard because literally sugar's in everything, even in hot sauces, which seems a little bit insane. I'm how is this in a hot sauce right now? I don't know what's happening. But it's hard. And then there's a lot of ridicule. So if we go to a family function, they'll be oh, let your child be a child. And I was no, you don't understand. If they have sugar, they become a completely different person. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard for other people to get their mind around if they don't know anything about diet, which I feel like it's safe to say like a lot of people don't understand or don't pay attention to the diet, especially with children. And it's really important to like understand like how your child works on sugar. And like in my practice, I tend to see a lot of children who are extremely sensitive to like their surroundings. So when you introduce like sugars, white bread, sometimes dairy, because even some dairy has a lot of sugar in it, they don't know how to cope, and then they start producing these symptoms in correlation with like ADD, ADHD, but they may not actually have that. Like it's hard to say, but they can't concentrate and they have all of these things, but we're not asking that question about their diet. Like we're not getting clear of like, okay, if I tweak this or I change this, like is that going to help? Or I think a lot of children don't even have the proper nutrients in their diets just because we're so on the run and it's quick. Like I think of like every single like hockey family, like who's like, hey, I picked them up for school, we have a little time, and then we gotta go. We're like practice mode. And with that comes like eating out because it's quick, and they don't have that solution for their family, so they're not getting the nutrients that they need, which is really hard too. And I know you mentioned like healthy fats. I think that's really important because when I was working at the nutrition store, that was one of the recommendations from a doctor, I'm pretty sure, was putting the children on healthy like omega-3s to help with their brain health, and that significantly changed how they developed if they had these labels like ADHD, autism, that sort of thing. So but they incorporated it into their diet, but giving fish oils to children's not easy feat by any means.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a difficult task, especially with anything that doesn't come in a form that's like a gummy or something like that, and it's not always the most bioavailable in like the children's form of the vitamin. But especially with fats, like you said, there's been so many studies about autism, ADHD, ADD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, like all of those things can come from an omega-3 deficiency. Obviously they're not 100% causative and you can't say that, but there's research that shows that supplementing that either through diet or actual nutritional supplements, it can help get rid of those symptoms or help their body deal with their foods in a better way to produce basically a better functioning child. And then with the sugar, it's like I always say to people, don't eat more foods that rob your body than that do good for your body. So things that are going to take more for your body to break down and for your body to process than it's actually giving you in nutrient value. So for kids' foods, I would say it's a lot of the like snack foods. That's the main thing. Like if you walk down the snack food aisle, it's the prepackaged like little tiny cookies and little muffins and Rice Krispie squares, and all of these things are high sugar, high carb, almost no nutrition or fortified nutrition, which isn't exactly the same thing. And it's going to take that child a lot more to break that down and figure out what to do with the sugar than it is actually giving you nutrition back. So kind of keeping mindful of what your child's body has to deal with, I guess, with throwing their food. Yeah.
And then you see like that influx of like energy and like the crash too with like a lot of those foods. And I find the thing is this is not an easy topic to talk about because I think it requires a lot of like attention from like parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents to just understand like nutrition as a whole and starting to like read labels, because I know like when I'm going shopping with like grandma to get snacks for like the little ones, she's like handing me the boxes and I'm like going through the label, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes you getting under like knowledge and understanding of what is in the food that I'm giving my child, and then understanding like reactions. I can confidently say to you like every single one of my babies has a food sensitivity, and like some of them it's been like right off the get-go, and then others like it's taken a while for us to see like what they're sensitive to, and the more we don't have that in their diet and we limit it or take it out or give other nutrients, it's really helped them almost like deal with the stressors around them. Because I think at the end of the day, and this is a reason why I really don't like the labels of like ADD, ADHD. I'm not saying your child doesn't have that, but at the end of the day, like children are children. Like they're going to press buttons, they're going to be hyperactive. But if we have to understand like how sensitive they are to like their environment, like electronics around them, which is like a completely different topic. Your energy around them, which is what we talked about last week with like mindful kids, but also like what is going into their body, like where is our food being shipped from, like what's happening with the different things, like do I need to like supplement, that sort of thing. And I know it's not easy to introduce like foods to children if they've had that diet. I know what I always say, the advice I say to the parents is, children are so smart, they're going to adapt to things. So the more like you keep up with it and the more that you change your diet and incorporate things, the easier transition it is for the child. And to like to stick with it. And a lot of the time, like within my family, we use a lot of like education, so they know like, oh, auntie can't eat this because of this, and auntie can't eat this because of this. And I work to like educate them, or try to just say like, you know, this is not really good for your body, so we don't really want to include a lot of foods like that. And sometimes they love the foods that are healthy, and sometimes it's not so easy. In your course, did you find that? Like, were there certain mechanisms that they talked about with like how to introduce food into diet for the children, or like how to make it easier for parents in some ways?
Yeah, there's a couple like different approaches to take. Like, kids are picky. They are trying new things, and like it's always going to be a battle at some point. Like no kid is always going to be accepting of all foods, and you just have to take that as it is. Like sometimes you can introduce something, and if they really are opposed to it, then try introducing it again in like a month or so and see. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times for the body to kind of accept that it likes a new flavor, especially with young kids when they haven't tried certain palettes, like flavor palettes of things. They might not be used to that, and just because it's unfamiliar, they don't like it. And that's just the way their brain works sometimes, and that's fine. But don't give up on a food just because one time they say that they don't like it. That's one thing that I've seen pretty common is, oh, we tried broccoli and they don't like it, so never again. We don't want to have that approach. The other thing is just getting kids involved with cooking, I think helps a lot, because they have some, and I know that is a challenge in its own right. But usually what I see, or like what I've come across, is people will take their kid grocery shopping, but it's here's the phone, sit in the cart and like play with the phone, or just kind of distract yourself. And when you get the kid,
it's like the iPad at the restaurant. We can't deal with this right now.
And like there's always a time, like I know it's easy sometimes if you're in a rush to just like give the technology and let the kid sit there, and that's fine. But at the same time, if you take them into the produce section and say, okay, like, what do you see here that you want? It kind of builds a little bit of a relationship with the food, and they picked it, and they almost say like, oh, because I picked it, they're a little bit more accepting of what you're serving them. So even if they're not directly involved in the cooking, if they're too young, then saying like, oh, like if they pick out like a bright red pepper, then you can kind of get them excited about that, which is a little bit of a different approach. It's not saying it's going to work all the time, but it's their thing that they chose, which is kind of like a nice process to have with them. And then when they're older, even if it's just making something simple like no bake granola bars or something like that, you have the snack for the week. And then they also start to learn how to cook. Like a lot of people just don't know how to cook or are afraid of cooking, and it's more of a burden, but you get to spend the time with them. They see the value in making their own food, and you kind of foster that relationship of acceptance with the food and the appreciation that comes with making it, which I think is kind of lost nowadays because everything is rushed and fast. And if kids learn from a young age that you can make good food on your own and be involved in that process, the chances that they're going to eat it because they made it is a little bit higher. So that's always like something to consider in the process.
I like that. I think it also like gives a family dynamic and a family activity, or like almost cultivates a little bit more like being present and like mindfulness. Yes, it's going to take away from like the time that you're like on your device or on the go or whatever. Like it creates time, but at the same time, like they're learning new skills, and their skills that's going to help them like later on in life, and they're having like fun, and they're being around like their parent and building a relationship that way, and but also like learning things about the food, which I think is so important. Like children are naturally like very curious about things, so to be able to educate them about that, I think is like a huge tool for their toolbox, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and then the other thing that you mentioned was just from an education standpoint is teaching children like why certain things are good. And I never like saying that things are good or bad. Like it's not all black and white, but at the same time, even if you don't know about nutrition, try and find someone that does. And I know like reaching out for help is tough sometimes, and it's time or money, or there's always an excuse not to do it, but nutrition is complicated. It's a huge subject. There's lots of opinions on it, but just reaching out to someone to get at least even just a little bit of information for yourself so you can kind of help your child understand basically like good choices, I guess is the right word I'm looking for. Like from my personal experience, it's usually for the most part kids with either like a behavioral difference or maybe like a learning development disorder that they're coming in, or hyperactivity or something like that, where the parent is kind of saying like, oh well, like I don't want to medicate my child, which I'm not saying you should or you shouldn't, that's like your decision, everyone's different, but it is something that you can help with diet most of the time, at least in some way. So reaching out when you can, and then finding someone, like if you don't know if something is good or bad or what to do next, then find someone that can help you help your kids.
Yeah, I like that. I think sometimes it's not the answer of like to medicate or not to medicate. Sometimes the best thing is getting educated. And I think like I preach that a lot in like my clinic and my practice, or talking with clients, or just anyone, is like get educated on like things that you can do, because diet might not completely like help the child. Maybe there is a lot of underlying issues that are going on, but like let's come together and find many tools that they can use, and like diet is one of those tools that can help alleviate some of the symptoms. And I want people to get educated, but then I also want them to like almost put themselves in like that child's like body to understand, because it's easy for a parent or someone who has been through the system and like the structurization of everything to be like, why won't you just sit still? Like I don't understand what's happening right now. Like I don't, and like it's easy to get wrapped up and like worked up around it, but I want them to understand maybe what's happening like in that child. And I think like definitely how I view my medicine, how I view my practice has changed so much, having 4 beautiful, sensitive babies in my life. Like they teach me so much, and if anything, they make me that much more passionate about, you know, what I have to offer, the education that I have to offer to other people, because I'm like, what are we doing to our babies? Like, how can we cultivate change? And you're right, like going and getting educated and asking for help or going to get guidance. Like, it's not easy being a parent, especially a parent in this day and age, and dealing with our own stressors and being on the run, and having to raise children is a small feat in itself. But having that support system of like leaning on different practitioners, like a nutritionist or someone that can help you, maybe even cultivate like a meal plan, and then have, you know, Saturday, Sunday meal prepping some things, or finding healthier options, or understanding what sensitivities the children have, can go so far in helping to shape like how your child's going to develop. Is there any deficiencies? Like, what should I be doing? But it gives you like a good foundation to like help the child learn in life, which I think is so important, but also alleviate some of the stress for the parent.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm going to like you as a nutritionist and be like, hey Carly, like this is my thing, can you help me, or can you give me some suggestions? You might be able to like even get like a meal plan to like where your whole family kind of like has it, and obviously each member of the family is going to have slightly different palates, but at least you can have one meal which you can like slightly change for the children, versus like you cooking a meal for the child and then you cooking a meal for the parent, because the child will only eat hot dogs or chicken fingers and fries. Like and I find the more you do it as like a unit, the more it's easier for the children, especially if now they're like older and you're making these changes. It's going to be harder for you to break some of these habits, but then that's where like the consistency, or like going to someone like such as yourself to get that education, can really help.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it, like you said, working as a unit and just making sure everyone's on board, because in some families there is like a little bit of a divide between either children or even between the parents, where if one partner in that relationship is more into the health and nutrition aspect and one isn't, you have to kind of take that out of the equation and focus on what's best for the child or children in that situation. Mm-hmm. Like, even if one partner is fine with eating whatever they want and doesn't really put the value there, if your child is having an issue of some sort, then you need to make that a priority for that person. Mm-hmm. And then also just understanding that even if you have more kids, like, so if you have two children, what works for one in food doesn't mean that it will work for the other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also one of the issues that I commonly see, is just every child in one family may be treated the same when they're completely bio-individual. Mm-hmm. So what if one kid can eat chicken fingers and be fine, and then the other one is off the rails afterwards, then you kind of have to say like, oh, maybe this is like a gluten, or maybe this is some kind of issue with like the processing of the food or a preservative in the food. And it's just working as a unit, but also being able to step back and kind of analyze each person as an individual and find.
It's also an interesting point too that you brought up, because it could be so many things. Like, it could literally be like the chicken. It could literally be like how the chicken was raised or produced or processed. It could be the gluten. Like, it
could be like MSG or something.
Yeah. Like, it could be something so small in it, which is, I think, why I tend to tell a lot of my clients to focus on whole food and less processed. And you're right. Like, it's not black and white, and nothing in life is black and white. If anything, like, it's a full spectrum, and it's not easy to be like, oh, you have this is the problem. It's not. Like, in a lot of my practice, like, I'm seeing a lot of different sensitivities across the border, and it's just because we as individuals are sensitive, and most people have a food sensitivity and don't even know that they do, because they've lived their entire life like this. And it's hard for children to communicate that to you. They don't know maybe have the words or the understanding as we as adults would, and that's why it's so important to just like be an observer and be mindful, like, oh, they did eat this and then this was their reaction, or they did take this and then this was their reaction. Like, with all things, I would say is super important to make sure, like, you as a parent or as a grandma or aunt or uncle or whatever, babysitter, you're mindful of, like, and you're present with your children to know, like, this is causing this reaction or whatever is so important.
And just realizing, like you said, it's very rarely one thing. You're very lucky if you find one thing and that is directly causing the problem. In holistic nutrition, the idea is that you always look at kind of the whole body and everything that could be influencing that. So for someone, like you said, there's a lot of sensitivities, and I agree, almost everyone probably has a sensitivity to at least one thing. With that, what we, like, from my opinion, I would look at, okay, there's a food sensitivity, but what has that done to the gut? Has that caused inflammation in the gut? From there, what has that put on the immune system as a stress, because you're having a reaction there? From the immune system stress, what is that doing to your brain and adrenal glands, because they're having to produce those hormones that cause stress? It kind of spreads out into such a broad range of problems, symptoms, and
it's systemic.
Yeah, it really, and that's the thing, like, you, even if you say, oh, my child has a gluten sensitivity, if one sensitivity exists, there's a very high chance that other ones do it as well, until you repair the body to a point where it's not reacting to having a sensitivity to anything.
Yeah.
So kind of, as a parent, I would advise, not me as a parent, and my advice to people as a parent would be that just not to give up and just assume that it's only one thing, because sometimes you can do all the right things by the book, like take out gluten and dairy and all that stuff, but it might be like red pepper that they're having a sensitivity to. And I had a client who had migraines for years. She was reacting to black pepper on her food, and she put pepper on everything, but who would think that it's pepper?
Yeah.
Like, it's, and that's the thing, like, sometimes it's something so small, and then the black pepper caused other problems. And you just have to accept that the first thing you try won't always work.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that it will. Just be persistent with it, and just know that there's other things that could be causing it. Like, I know you mentioned, like, technology around them, like, what is that doing? Even just, like, living close to somewhere that creates a lot of pollution can have, like, some people are very highly sensitive individuals, and you don't know what is going on around that, especially with children. Like, they can't always say or have the body awareness to know that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And you know that because you have the experience as an adult to say, like, oh, something seems off. But just know that it's kind of an all-encompassing thing, and what one issue might be causing could cause multiple symptoms as well. So it kind of works both ways. Like, one thing can cause a million symptoms, and a million symptoms might come from a little thing that you never thought of. So just be aware that the body is
pretty amazing.
It's amazing and confusing, and it's okay to not know what's going on sometimes.
I think this is important to bring up, because there's a lot of things in our medical system too that, you know, there might not be a cause, or you might not have the right diagnosis, but just to, like, also be aware that it took a period of time for your body to get like this and to produce some of these symptoms, most likely, or then, like, wreak havoc later on. So it's not going to be a quick fix. Like, sometimes pulling out one thing isn't going to be a quick fix, and you need to understand, like, how your child feels with taking that thing out, and, you know, did it lessen symptoms? Okay, perfect. So, like, let's leave that out of the diet, and now let's include some omega-3s to see, like, is that helping on a completely different level? Okay, good. Okay, like, their immune system's really down because they're in school. Okay, can we include, like, maybe a probiotic, because there is also so much havoc on their gut? And, like, finding these little ways to help the situation and help heal, and, like, it's basically a puzzle. Like, we're a puzzle and we're trying to, like, piece everything together, and so just because you have one piece of the puzzle doesn't mean the puzzle's solved.
Exactly.
Like, it's very all-encompassing, and it's understanding, like, these bigger pictures, and there's no such thing as a quick fix ever. Definitely, like, in my practice of, like, what it is I do, it is interesting to see how the body works and how all-encompassing everything is, and trying to get people the results that they want. And quite often they'll just stop because you'll give them one thing and they're like, oh no, I'm good, but, like, meanwhile, like, they're not, and their mind is still racing, and they're having all of these other, like, negative thoughts. It's just you alleviated, like, a piece of it for them, so for them they're good, but there's lots of pieces. And to I guess from this say, like, you need to have patience. You need to have understanding that, like, it's not black and white, and there could be a lot of things, because you look at the human body, like, there's a ton of components, and the human body is actually, like, incredibly amazing structure, and it has so many communicational pathways. It's hard to understand. And I think even with science nowadays, like, we're just, like, I almost want to say, like, we're just getting our toe in the water now to understand the capacity of the human body, which seems crazy to even say because of how much research has been done. But I truly don't think, like, we even have touched some of the stuff that the human body is even capable of, which is pretty amazing.
Especially with, like, nutrition, like, anything, like, about the human, like, it's a mystery. There's still so many things that we haven't discovered, but as a parent, like, don't beat yourself up about not knowing nutrition. As someone who has had 7 years of school in nutrition, I still feel like I am just barely scraping the surface. Like, this has been my life, living and breathing for the last while, and it's still, like, I'm learning new things every day, and we still don't know a lot about nutrition from the general standpoint of things. Like, yes, we do know things, but nutrition is something that is always changing. Like, we say, like, 30 years ago fats were really bad for you, avoid everything with fat in it, and now, okay, no, we need to embrace fats. It's so important to your body,
like,
and just
need healthy fat.
Like, it's such an important part of a diet, especially for children. And it's so, like, I would say never get discouraged if you don't know, like, what is going on with your child. It's tough, and nutrition is such a broad subject, and it's hard to kind of wrap your head around, but just know that there's always something else you can do. The diet, can be changed 1,000,001 different ways, so it's just a matter of finding the path within everything that's going on. I think with children nutrition especially.
I think, like, being compassionate with yourself and, like, your parenting is always, like, top, always the top. And then just trying to, like, cultivate more, like, self-awareness and more self-education, so then you can teach your children certain things, and that's, like, the best way. I mean, it might be, like, baby steps, because some things do require cost. So it might be, like, finding those baby steps, or, like, slowly taking things out of the diet to see, like, what's going to work best for them. So you're right, like, not being discouraged or not beating yourself up or being like, oh, I'm such a terrible parent because we're doing these things, this, and this. That's okay. Like, know that that's okay. Know that you're doing the best based on, like, what you have today. And then, but you have options, like, you have choice, and to go get more education or go to someone like a nutritionist, I think is super important, just to get some more education and awareness of, like, what you could potentially be doing. If not for your child, also for, like, you, because nutrition affects us in so many different ways.
Especially, like, children are so observant of other, like, they're always looking to other people for signals, whether that be, like, a blatant, like, please go and do this, or they're just kind of looking for kind of other thing, just, like, how to kind of navigate their day from other people. So if, especially with nutrition, if you're coming home stressed and rushing through to cook and just, like, throwing something out there and saying, like, go take your plate and go eat in front of the TV because you want some alone time, it's just sending kind of stressful signals towards the child, and then it's kind of, that's gonna, you never know how that's gonna kind of come up again later in life. Like, do I want to be stressed every time I'm eating? No. That affects digestion, and especially just the way you structure your meals. If it's always rushed, you're probably not getting everything that you could out of the food that you're eating. So an easy one would be, like, you come home from work and it's late and your child is hungry, chicken fingers and, like, fries that can be put on the same tray in the oven at the same temperature. It's super easy, but at the same time, like, there's a lot missing from that meal, and there's, again, like, that carb spike and then crash afterwards, where you're going to get mood swings and a cranky child and crying or tantrums, or maybe they go over the top and are like running around and you can't get them quiet. That's kind of something that you always need to be thinking about, and just making sure that even if you don't fully know where to go with nutrition, just give your child's body a good foundation to work off of. I think that's usually the most important thing. Like, your body is based off of what you eat. Like, your body is producing neurotransmitters and producing hormones and building itself up out of what you're putting into it. And I think people kind of lose sight of that nowadays, because convenience is the easier choice.
Yeah.
And like, if you're feeding your body trash, like, you're going to not function well. You can't expect a child to be super adamant about paying attention in class if their brain is trying to deal with everything that their body is taking in. So just making sure that you're just being mindful of what you're giving to them as well. Sometimes, yes, it may be easier to choose the fast thing, but if you just take maybe an extra 10 or 20 minutes, you can...
Cereal.
Yeah, cereals, yeah. It's one of my big hurdles with people, because it's quick and easy.
It's especially in the morning when everything's
it's hectic. Yeah.
But then, like, the child goes to school, or they're on their bus or whatever, and then they're just like not functioning, or they're tired because they've hit that crash, or whatever the story is. Like,
yeah, like, you get that rush of sugar and everything else that's in there, and maybe your child doesn't quite process milk properly, and then you get on the bus and it's exciting and there's children around, and so it's that like hyper feeling, and then you get to school and you're asked to sit and be quiet, and that's when your blood sugar starts dropping, and then the kid starts either not paying attention or I used to fall asleep in class. Like, I'd have a very hard time staying awake, and I wholeheartedly believe that was because I was having some kind of issue with the food I was eating. And it's little things like that you kind of have to look out for. And I almost wish that, I don't know what it is like in schools nowadays, but if like teachers were a little bit more mindful and said, hey, so and so falls asleep almost every day around 1 o'clock, I think maybe it might be something like, they don't have the education or background to do that. But if in the future at some point we could get to a point where there's like that open communication, saying like, oh, something else might be going on, and it's not just on the parent who isn't there all the time as well. Like, I'm not saying, oh, teachers, you need to tell parents that someone's kid isn't eating right. That's not at all what I'm saying. But ideally, in a perfect world, or maybe in the future, we could get to like communication point of, oh, maybe it is something that the child is reacting to.
I think that would be like amazing. Like, ideally, like down the road, I definitely see myself partaking in some sort of like school program, or helping to build it, because I think it's so important for health educators and health practitioners to be in the room and like help educate what happens like in the classroom. Like, I think it could help a lot if you had a school setting and you brought in people who, you know, maybe knew mindfulness, or maybe knew like the energetic and like psychosomatic natures of children outside of maybe like a counselor, because I know that they have included a few of these services already, and then someone with some like holistic nutrition. It could really help structure a much different classroom setting without having to be like pressuring parents to like medicate their children, which can be very stressful for a parent to know like, there's something wrong with my child. Like, I don't know how many parents I have seen that elicits such a response on them, like thinking that there's something wrong with their child. And I always address to them, like, whether they have a diagnosis or not, there's nothing wrong with your child. Like, your child is a child, and you know what, like, let's get to the bottom. Like, let's do some energetic stuff with them, some sessions. Like, let's look at their nutrition. Let's see if there's deficiencies, and kind of understand where some of these symptoms are coming from, because there's nothing wrong specifically with the child
Yeah.
is a child. A lot of it is like environment, a lot of it's like what we're putting in them, and maybe things aren't firing accordingly, and that's producing all of this. But it's, as soon as you have that conversation or that statement, it's completely different than like there's something wrong with your child, or the child even thinking there's something wrong with me. Like, to me, that's so incredibly heartbreaking. And to be able to break down that barrier more and have the tools such as nutritionists coming in to talk to the kids or even the parents about healthy nutrition and what that looks like, or a mindfulness person coming in and talking about mindfulness and what does that look like, or even an energetic practitioner coming in and talking about like different things in the environment and how it affects the child, or even just educating teachers and parents on at the energetic component of children, and like maybe they're just like highly sensitive beings. How is it we can give them more coping tools, I think is like super important. Like I don't even know how many children that I see that are like empaths, and that is like a whole other ball game on its own. But having tools like nutrition and mindfulness can really help those children thrive as they're dealing with being an empath and other people's energy, and what does that feel like, because that's like a whirlwind on its own, right? So I think that's something that like should be taking place in the future.
Yeah, and I think like you kind of hit the nail on the head. Like the symptoms are a product of kind of not just one thing. Like it's everything going on with the child. It could be diet, it could be environment, it could be like stress or something that you don't know exactly what they're dealing with. It's never something that's fundamentally wrong with your child. Like that is almost, I can't say I've ever seen something where like something is actually wrong with a person, whether adult or child. It's a circumstance of what your environment is. So whether that is the food that you're taking in, or for example with children, like they get sick all the time. They're kids, like they're building their immune system. They're going out and like licking things that they probably shouldn't have their mouths on. Like it's going to happen. But with like for some like the high availability of like antibiotics and stuff, if your kid's gut bacteria is completely wiped out and it doesn't fully get replaced the way it should be, then what does that do? Like there's a lot of studies that show, again with just like mental health alone, let alone like developmental disorders or like learning disabilities, that the gut bacteria really is a big part of that. And even in teenagers where you're seeing anxiety and depression come out a little bit earlier than it should, you kind of have to consider that as something as well. It's not necessarily like you can never think, oh, it's something wrong with the child. It could have been something that happened 10 years ago and maybe they just didn't recover from it, or maybe a deficiency is starting to come out, or for like teenagers, like for girls on birth control, like I know from personal experience, they don't necessarily tell you the nutritional deficiencies that can come from that. And you kind of have to, it's unfortunate that you're not told things like that, or that a probiotic isn't like a doctor mandated thing after antibiotics. And I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't be, it's always up to that person, but just thinking about little things like that that might have an effect on that kid. It's just knowing that the symptoms are kind of a product of multiple things, and diet is one component for sure, but it could be so many other things.
Like in my practice, I preach a lot about like the medicine wheel, and that physical component is like that diet, the environment, the exercise, etc. Their genes, or their susceptibility with the genes, as we learn in like epigenetics. But there's also like the mental, the emotional, the spiritual aspects of someone, and sometimes one thing can be a rippling out effect of so many different factors. Like it could be like they have poor gut health, then they were also being bullied at school, and then that's caused out a ripple effect. Or maybe that one time when you left them in the van with their Uncle Harry, they felt abandoned by you, and as a child they weren't able to get over that. So sometimes it's something so simple as an adult we'd be like, what? But for a child, that elicited an emotion in them that they weren't able to fully process, and then from there it's been this like rippling out effect of symptoms, and we like to treat the symptoms, and sometimes it's neither right or wrong. It's about creating mindfulness about what health actually is and all of the different tools or avenues that can come into place. And it's not saying conventional versus alternative medicine. It's finding the balance between and understanding, like, as a parent, with children, with anyone, with yourself, like, there are things that you can do, and there's lots of options and there's lots of tools, and the best thing to do is start and ask questions, get educated, and just pool in quite a few of the different options to help out with things, which I think is super important to understand.
Yeah, nutrition is, like, I always say to any parent of a child that comes in, at least to see me, or if it's a friend or anything like that, nutrition is, like you said, a tool. Like, it's one of many things, and as long as you're giving your child as many tools as possible to learn and develop and be the best person that they can be, then that's what you do as a, like, you want the best for your child, and maybe nutrition isn't what's bothering them, but you're setting them up for success in that way. So making sure that they have enough protein to make neurotransmitters and hormones, and make sure that their digestion is functioning properly and producing enzymes, things like that. Making sure that they have carbs for energy and to feed their brain, and fats to build that brain. Like, as long as you're giving them those components in the best forms that you can, then that's what, like, you're doing great. Like, give them what they need and let their body do the rest with that. As long as you're giving those foundational basics, then their body will build up from there.
Yeah, I like that. And to the flip side of the coin too, like, as a parent, like, don't be so stressed that you have to, like, bubble wrap the child, or like go out and buy, like, one of those giant bubbles for them to run around in, or they're only allowed to eat this and this. Like, I think following more of, like, an 80-20 style, like, having some treats, like, life is about balance, but if you're going to have a treat, like, be mindful of what that may, if it's going to elicit a reaction, or can I make it, like, a healthier treat and have them not even know that there's no refined sugar in it. There's still sugar, but it's, like, healthier sugar, like coming from maple syrup or some other thing. And then as a parent, just being able to, like, let go a little bit, because it can be a little overwhelming to be like, oh my gosh, now I have to learn all this stuff, and there's so many and then, like, you can literally go crazy and be completely inundated of, like, how many dietary approaches there are out there. I think you're right. You just need to be cautious about, like, is this adequate amount of protein? Like, where is it coming from? Can my child digest it? Cool. And then, like, getting your veggies. Like, I think we need to simplify things, like veggies, fruit, keeping things whole, making sure they have, like, healthy fats for development, that sort of thing. The more we, like, bog things down, the more anxieties develop with the parent, and then, like, with the child, because they're living in such a high stress thing, which is also another reason why it's perfect to go and, like, ask questions and, like, get an expert, like, on your team. Like, I'm a huge believer in the fact that, like, it's not like you don't just need a doctor. Like, maybe you need, like, a counselor, a doctor, a dentist, an optometrist, like a spiritual healer, someone who does Reiki, someone who does homeopathy. Maybe you need a naturopath. Maybe, like, you need a whole team to help you. One of, like, the favorite sayings in our family is it takes a village to raise a child, and it is so true. And in my family dynamic, we definitely have that approach. Like, auntie's around all the time, like, helping out or trying to as best as possible. Same with grandma, same with the parents, and we all try to, like, help raise the children, because it's important, and it's important to have everyone on the same page and have a united front.
I think good. Yeah, and I think that comes back to that 80-20, like, as a parent, if you have other people involved as well, it's going to give you a little bit more of that work-life balance, because it's very easy as a parent to get stuck in the parent bubble and feel as though that is like your only thing. And yes, your children are your world, but you need to take care of you as well. And the child also needs to kind of have time to explore themselves as a person.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the same with nutrition, 80-20, like you need to kind of allow yourself to be free sometimes, and having other people involved and getting other advice is going to give you that balance between like, oh, maybe this person said, oh, I should only eat this way, but this other opinion, it just gives you a little bit of a reality check of, oh, there are other options and there are other people involved, and I can kind of go out and do what feels right for you as a family versus getting overwhelmed with one opinion that you're not totally sure about or something like along those lines. Like, ask your grandma, maybe she knows some like kind of remedy,
ancient medicine,
like, some kind of like folk medicine or something. Like you never know what's gonna end up helping someone, and because everyone is completely and utterly different, and it's amazing, but it's a process of finding what's gonna work for everyone as well.
Yeah, I would say like probably like top tips as like a parent, making sure the kid's getting out, getting exercise, using those dietary 5 top tools that like Carly was suggesting, making sure like there's good protein, making sure there's good fats, making sure like good veggies, whole foods, watching what reactions that they're having after the food. If you're concerned, like go get checked out. Like if you don't really know like what's going on, like I always say that to like my clients, I'm like, if you think it's something, like go get checked out at the doctors. That's like, they're good at helping with that stuff. And then from there you have a working knowledge of like what's kind of going on, and then you can seek out these other people. And then as a parent, like sometimes being that like working on your own health is an outward reflection of your family, and the more you cultivate your own inner wisdom, guidance, and mindfulness, the more sometimes you have like those gut feelings to know like, you know what, I know the nutritionist said this, but like it's not really jiving with my family unit, so I'm gonna try this way, and if this way works good, then like you're good. Like you don't need to stress about it, you don't need to worry, you don't need to have anxiety. You need to be like confident in knowing how to navigate things once you have the education, which I think is super important, like as a family, and working through things that way. Yay! Thank you so much, Carly, for all of your knowledge and this amazing talk. If you guys have any questions for Carly, you like what the conversation was about, you want to know more about certain things, like please let me know. Comment below, like, share. I'll put Carly's information in if you have any questions for her, so you can reach out to her or maybe get some like a consult because of her working knowledge. That would be amazing. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Bye.